Hi, everybody. It's time for another prayer video, prayer message. I want you to, if you have a chance, when you go on the prayer network, to look at all the wonderful requests. And I want all of you to imagine that everybody is praying for you because that's how this works. Everyone is keeping you in mind. I go through the prayer requests every day and I keep as as the group in mind as I say my own prayers. And and the way that I pray is that I just ask for the grace of healing to come into everyone's life in the most appropriate way. Um, and people ask for healing with their children and with decisions they're making, with illnesses in their family, with just and when I read these requests, my heart opens up so much because this is the human experience. I mean, this is what we all experience in life. We are all facing illnesses in our family, with our friends, loss, fear of what's happening to someone we love. This is the human experience. And in sharing what we're going through, I don't know how it impacts you, but for me, it it makes me want to just reach into that person and hold them and just say, this is what I can offer you is prayer. And I know that prayer feels like air sometimes. Just a word, well, I'll pray for you. But I think if people really understood the power of prayer, they would realize what a profound gift it is to have someone say, I will keep you in my prayers. Uh, even even yesterday, I received, several emails about needing to remember them in their prayers as for personal reasons, for children, and and I wrote back and I said, of course I will, of course I will. And sometimes when I think about it, I think, how am I gonna, how am I gonna do? But it's not a matter of how many; it's a matter of just all of these people. I can't hold all their names, Lord, but I can hold all of these people in my intention. And it directs grace somehow. And I know through all of the many mystical experiences that I know of, and the many mystical experiences I've had, that prayer is this infusion of holy light and grace. And even though we may not see in the moment, in the immediate moment, the results we're looking for, that doesn't mean a thing. That doesn't mean that this grace is not pouring in. Healing happens at the pace that we can handle it, believe it or not. I'm convinced of that because I know I've spoken many times about miracles, and we call a miracle an event that happens, a healing or some other event that happens outside the boundaries of what we call conventional time and space. When a doctor says, that this can't be healed or whatever, and suddenly it is healed, and they call that a miracle because in the chemical world, in the chemical scientific world, that healing can't take place. But in the world of the mystical world, in the world of where time and space are not factors, light moves in, holy light moves in, holy power moves in, and it adjusts the cell tissue into present time, into its healing place. Now, I think part of why I wanted to start this prayer and healing community is because we have a need to be part of a community. And even though we are not gathering together once a week for a dinner and sharing, one on one, nevertheless, I think that as time goes by and we become accustomed to reaching out and sharing and reading and communicating with each other through this network, my hope is that we'll begin to see consequences and results in our life, even in small ways, even in ways of realizing that I feel better about something. And I before I asked and I asked for healing, and the way it came was I realized that I actually was feeling better, but it was 2 months later. It was 2 months later. Oftentimes the pace of healing is very much in keeping with the kind of pace of our lives. It's rare that someone gets an instant healing, but it happens, and it happens more often than you realize. Um, I've often thought that that type of healing occurs within a person who has the capacity to have an experience outside of time and space, and it doesn't somehow threaten their reality, but it enhances their reality. In other words, in all my years as I've been teaching, how often I've heard people say that when I was growing up and I had experiences where kids oftentimes see spirits when they're little, and that's actually normal. And how many times they'd say, well, I thought I was crazy, or I heard a voice and I thought I was crazy. And they go to the crazy gear instead of saying, I wonder if I'm able to go through the veil, if that other reality is that something I could access? Now, a kid can't say that, but if an adult were to say to that child, did you know? And what was that spirit like? And who was it? Instead of shutting it down, oftentimes children will see their family members. They might see their grandparents if they've passed on, or they might see their guide, and they would come back and say, to their parent, well, I saw an angel, or I saw grandpa. And if a parent were to say, well, that's wonderful, what did they say? Instead of telling them such a thing doesn't exist, how differently our sensory system would develop as we grew up. We wouldn't be inclined to think that just our five senses provided us with accurate data, just what we could physically see or physically hear or physically taste, but rather we would actually be comfortable with this idea that there's the physical reality and then there's the non-physical that is even more loaded with data and allies and participants and life than the life that I see. And it is that world that when we pray, we are involving that world in negotiating the outcomes of what we're creating here, of what we're creating. And remember that prayer works, prayer is asking for a level of grace that is pouring into the the creative realm, and it works its way into the physical. So that if the obstacle to something is an attitude, or the obstacle is fear, the obstacle is something in you, that's the obstacle that needs to be moved or healed before anything physical can be healed. I mean, if somebody breaks out, I remember a person who always broke out in this rash when she got angry. She'd just rash out, and she wanted this rash healed. And I said, well, how is that going to be possible if you don't deal with your anger, which made her angry, which made her angry, and it, it she just she couldn't connect the two. It was impossible for her to connect the two because one dealt with how she controlled her life and the people in her life, and anger was her main voice. It was her authority center. So without anger, she couldn't imagine how she would get her point across, or in other words, em- empower herself. So her rash was a permanent part of her, you know. At any rate, um, prayer. I also received a letter that from somebody that said that they've given up on prayer, that God has abandoned the United States because of the outcome of the election. Now, for some people, the election was exactly what they prayed for, exactly the outcome. And for other people, it's exactly not the outcome. Now, the truth is that heaven doesn't pick sides. So I just don't believe heaven picks sides. We pick sides. We do. That's what we do. And we pick sides because of how we want to live, what our values are, how we see community, how we imagine the future as something frightening, as something um, that we want to limit and share just with us. I mean, how we imagine the future. What is truth, however, is that we are all sharing this planet. We are all sharing this planet. And that this election, no matter which side you are on, no matter who you voted for, no matter who, the outcome involves all of us. And that, in order for that outcome to maximize its fullest potential in grace, I would invite you all to consider praying for the grace of the most positive to come into us. Now, what I do know about heaven is that heaven plays the long game, whereas we pray for immediate outcomes. Today I'm not well. Today I need this. Today I need this. We do not ever consider in our prayers 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or who we must become in order to be effective 10 years from now. I remember when I was in college one time, I didn't get the position of being the editor on our publication. I was a journalism major, and I desperately wanted that, and I didn't get it. And so I was devastated. I mean, I just wanted to throw myself off a bridge, and I thought I would have no future and no career. Nothing would work. I mean, this is how we talk to ourselves. But I really, really took it to the mat. I mean, when I go into overdrive in terms of my emotional desperation, I mean, it's something to watch. So I had a dream, and in the dream, my ever-present companion guide, took me to a place where he was sitting with me, and I was at the time 20 years old, and in the dream I was 40. And he said, "Okay, now I want you to look back and tell me what you're still upset about as a 40-year-old." And actually, what I wanted to do was look at what I looked like as a 40-year-old. But I looked back and I said, "I can't remember anything." He said, "That's right. That's how significant it is. Now go back there and deal with it." And then I woke up. Is that not the most wonderful dream in the world? Is that not one of the best dreams you've ever heard? I have used that dream again and again, and the practice that was given to me in that dream my whole life. I go ahead 4 years. I'll go ahead 10 years and think, am I going to worry about this a few years from now? Is this going to be an issue when I'm dealing with people? If someone's, about being forgiving, which is really not that difficult for me for all kinds of reasons. But one is I go ahead several years and I think, am I going to remember this? And the truth is, I'm not going to. Well, if I'm not going to remember it 20 years from now, I'm not going to record it now. So let it go. And heaven is a timeless place. And the events happening are often the events that have to bring out dynamics that we need to deal with. All of us. All of us. Not Democrats, not Republicans, not independents, not Druids. All of us. All of us. I know that we are on a path toward becoming a global species, a global community. I don't think any of us will live long enough to see that day happen, and not even maybe the next generation, or maybe the generation after that. But it is inevitable that that's going to happen. That this will be good, because even our technology is making us more so step by step. And the reason I say that is because our bodies have become a holistic enterprise. And what is in one is in the whole. So the way we are learning to handle ourselves holistically is going to be reflected in how we must handle the crises facing our planet holistically, because they're not small anymore. Pandemics, climate change, these are holistic challenges. They're not little secular problems anymore. They belong to all of us. And it's the part of us that can't get to the all of us that will be challenged. And all of us will be challenged by that. So it's in our best interests, all of our best interests, to pray for everybody, because we are all in this together. To not pick sides, but to rather pray that whatever lies ahead is something we navigate toward a holistic outcome, toward the best outcome, instead of a divisive one. Think of it as a challenge of how heaven works. Heaven supports always what is in the best interest. How will this support the law of balance? How will this support the law of equality? One thing that this country has never been able to handle is equality. And so that's going to come out in this. We have got to live up to this idea that all people are created equal, and we're not able to do that. And so maybe somehow or other, it's time for us to come to terms with that. It's time for us to come to terms with the things we have never been able to come to terms with. The equality of everybody who lives here, and then of the planet we share with millions, billions of other people. This is not our planet. This planet doesn't belong to us. We belong to the planet. So we have a lot of evolving to do as human beings. And sometimes that evolution takes something that shakes us to our core, because that will happen. I suspect that will happen. So what I'm saying is praying for everyone, being as loving as we can, not letting fear or resentment. So see what we can do to make people come together instead of separating. Okay. Just my thoughts. I know that I have committed myself to living that way. As hard as it is sometimes, I just don't see any other way. It seems like we were born for this time. And how we navigate this time is up to each of us. But I am choosing to navigate it toward the map of holism, toward becoming as loving as I can toward everybody. It's the way I would treat my cell tissues. I don't separate my cell tissue because I prefer my heart organ to my kidney. So that I ask you to think about that. Okay, and I'm going to end with this. Sometimes, Lord, I can sense that I've stepped into the presence of angels. I cannot see your holy messengers, yet I know they are near, very near. Someone asked me once, how do you know an angel is near? What does the presence of an angel feel like? Some questions have no answers. I could see that he wanted a reply that held a secret ingredient, a code perhaps. This man struck me as a grown-up child, longing to somehow find a way to encounter the sacred. If only he could glimpse the wing of an angel, the mere flutter of proof that the invisible world is filled with benevolent guardians of light, he'd be able to believe. I do not know how to penetrate that wall of doubt in people, but I constantly see the consequences of that barrier in their lives. I know this world is filled with angels. They are constantly watching over their assigned human beings. If only we knew, if only we knew. If people could realize in the moment of fear or confusion that assistance was hovering right next to them, what comfort that would bring. And yet people do not understand the way of divine assistance. Angels have a non-interference policy. It took me a long time, Lord, to truly understand that guidance is their task, whereas ours is choice. The choice before us is whether to trust the power of the sacred realm to guide us when we cannot yet see, or to fight our way through events that have already occurred. Everything in the physical world has already occurred, at least from heaven's perspective. It's a mystical truth that anything we see in the physical world is already history. It took me a long time to truly grasp that the stuff of the physical world is the end product of our collective choices, not the beginning. But I am grasping that truth, Lord, little by little. If we base our choices on what we see, we're responding to what has already happened. Real change begins in the invisible world, and it starts with listening to the guidance of angels and to your guidance. What is required of us is learning to trust the voice of our soul. I have to add, Lord, that I would not mind if every now and again my angel screamed instead of whispered, and I bet you agree with that. Grant me the grace of trust, Lord, to not fear the voice of my soul. I know that my voice is my lifeline to you, and that to sense it even once means I can never deny it again. Grant me the grace of trust, that I may begin with trusting my inner self, then little by little I'll find my way to you. Okay, everybody, that's all for now.